India, Australia's High Commissioner to India, Barry O'Farrell, joins us live now. Thanks so much for your time. Mr O'Farrell, what is your assessment of the situation in India right now?
Well, I suspect the World Health Organisation's assessment is probably better than mine, and what we've seen again overnight is more than 360,000 new cases. That means for the past week, every day there's been an increase of more than 300,000. And last night, India recorded its largest death rate since COVID began in India last year, of more than 3,600 deaths. And again, for the past week, that figure's been above 3,000.
And how many Australians are trying to get out of that nightmare situation?
Well, we have around 9,000 registered through the High Commission. We expect to see that number increase as it has over the past week. Obviously, as anxiety about the unfolding pandemic here has taken hold. So, we will continue, as we have over the past year, at all 4 posts in India, Calcutta, Mumbai, Chennai and here in New Delhi, to communicate with those Australians stranded in India. We'll particularly pay attention to the more than 600 of them who are listed as vulnerable and are due for repatriation back to Australia when flights resume. And we'll do everything we can to try and keep them in touch and informed.
And what makes them fall into the vulnerable category, those 600? Are they sick with COVID or other issues?
It's usually other issues. Obviously, we're notified. We would be notified normally if people are suffering COVID, and we would try and assist them to get the appropriate care. So normally the vulnerability relates to their circumstances, their financial situation, the like. But DFAT does have a range of programs that has been assisting Australians around the world over the past 12 months. That's available here in India. But the good news is that many of the Australians who are stuck here in India are with family or friends. That's not in any way diminishing the fact they want to get home and the fact that as Australians, we're obligated to get them home.
How many Australians in India have contracted COVID?
Well, I think you've just struck me. I've got the daily figures, I've got the overall figures, but it is still at a lower rate than other countries around the world because, of course, Laura, this is a country of 1.35 billion people. That's about almost 5 times the size of the United States. It's 52 times the size of Australia's population. The good news here is that more than 140 million people have been vaccinated in just over 100 days. 22 million of those have had their second shot. The better news is that Mumbai, India's largest city, which was hardest hit last year and which was hardest hit by the second wave, is starting to see the numbers fall. Here in the national capital, where people around the world have seen the crisis in our hospitals due to the lack of oxygen, the numbers are bouncing around between 20, 24, 28,000 new cases each day. And the only good news I can report here in New Delhi is that oxygen supplies appear to have been restored to appropriate levels. The crisis in Delhi, can I just explain, Laura, was because like the ACT, Delhi is a national capital. A bit like the ACT, it doesn't have a lot of manufacturing or industrial industry, and nor does Delhi. And Delhi did not have an industry like other states which produces oxygen. But the government of India has switched industrial oxygen to plants across to providing oxygen for medical services, for hospital services, and those oxygen supplies are now or have improved and are reaching the hospitals.
It is just such a frightening situation there in India. I suspect that of the more than 9,000 Australians there trying to get home, a large cohort of them would have contracted COVID. Are those Australians also relying on an already struggling Indian healthcare system?
Yes, as probably some of them have in the past. I make the point, though, Laura, that no Australian returning to Australia, no Australian getting on either a Qantas plane, a charter plane or an Air India plane can do so unless they have a COVID test that shows they're negative for COVID. But you're right, a part of the anxiety of those people who are stranded in India currently, those Australian citizens stranded in India, is their concern about the health system. And certainly, as I said, the health system in New Delhi, which is a city that has both a strong private and strong public health system, has been reaching capacity levels, particularly in relation to COVID beds, and that was exacerbated by the oxygen crisis that seemed to afflict this city as well. So that's the anxiety, that's the concern. But until the flight situation to Australia is reviewed in 3 weeks' time, they will have no certainty about what that return is going to be. But to be frank, it's been difficult to get Indian Australian citizens back to Australia throughout the past 12 months because, of course, India closed its national borders for a long time, as did Australia, and there was a scarcity of flights. But ultimately, we've got almost 20,000 Australian citizens back from India. We've got another 9,000 to 10,000 on the list, and we hope that when flights resume, we can safely return those Australians back home too.
Indeed, and Australians back home here, Barry O'Farrell, are worried about the pressure on our quarantine system. But if Australians in India are trying to get home and they need to pass 2 COVID tests and return a negative result, that means that burden is just transferred. Rather than being on our hotel quarantine system, it's already and going to continue to be on the Indian system. Is that fair?
Well, it's the system, and it's a system that's applied around the world. Can I say, Laura, that for some reason, in my humble view as just an observer these days, the media ignored perhaps the best story out of Australia forever yesterday on the front page of at least 9 newspapers, which was that Australia's quarantine system has been incredibly successful. I'm not sure Australians understand this, but around the world, including here in India, it is admired for protecting Australians and keeping Australia safe and keeping COVID quarantined, because so few people, a couple of handfuls of people, have moved from that system into the community and taken COVID with them. And so, the fact is that people coming to Australia from any country around the world are currently required to have 1 COVID test. They're now about to be required to have a rapid antigen test. That's a good thing. It's a good thing for Australians wanting to return to an Australia that is safe and free from COVID. It's a good thing from their friends and family who live in Australia, who also want to continue to live in a safe community.
Indeed, I think our quarantine system has been better than anywhere around the world. It's been run by the states with a little bit of grumbling from time to time, you might say. I'll just ask this one final question on it though. So, as we talk about how good our hotel quarantine system is, isn't that more of an argument to get these Indian Australians back home on a plane sooner rather than later?
The Prime Minister was very clear about this yesterday. Our system has worked because the level of infection in hotels has been at a level that state capitals, or in the case of Howard Springs, Darwin, could cope with. And what the Prime Minister made clear yesterday was that in a couple of those centres, the level of positivity rates of people testing positive with COVID coming from India into hotel quarantine was getting to a level that could put additional strains on our hospital cities in the capital cities, which doesn't just threaten returning citizens from overseas, but also poses a threat to the citizens that live in those cities.
Indeed. One final question. How long is it going to take to get these Australians home?
Well, that will depend on A, how long flights are paused, and B, whether when flights resume, there is any capacity for additional charters or additional repatriation flights.
And what are you telling Australians in India in the meantime?
Saying to Australians in India who haven't registered with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to do so, to fill out all those forms so we know where you are and we can communicate with you. For the rest of them, we're encouraging them to stay safe, to practice COVID protocols, and of course, to get in touch if there are crises.
And I should just ask, your team there at the embassy, all healthy?
Well, we're all healthy. We've been touched lightly by COVID, but very mild cases. But Laura, we're lucky. We're living in a city that's at the epicentre of this pandemic, which has had the oxygen crisis, but we're living in an embassy compound together with other Australians. We're all practicing the protocols people back home have been practicing, and happily, touch wood, we'll continue to get through this.